Good evening and welcome to Designing for Everyone. This program came about as we received a grant from the American Library Association, Libraries Transforming Communities, Accessibility in Rural and Small Communities. When we applied for the grant, we said, what do we do? How do we make sure that we're having the community conversations? Because that's what the grant is designed to do. And we knew that the library was having community conversations at the Smithville Community Gardens house. We also realized we're missing a lot of the potential participants in that conversation because the accessibility into that building is less than ideal. It's difficult to get into that building. There's no compliant ramp, and the floor's uneven, so we're missing a lot of those voices. So when we applied for the grant, we said, that's something that we want to do. We're having conversations in that building. Can we make it more accessible? That's how we'll spend some of our money. We got the grant, and we also took some training, and it was emphasized nothing about us without us. That it's not up to us as a city or as a library to decide how we're going to spend that grant money. It's up to the members of the community to help us decide. And it's especially up to members of the community of people with disabilities, because they're the ones that can speak to their experiences and speak to their needs. And that is what brought us here today. At the time we were applying for the grant, Jose, Alexis, several other city employees were working on the city's ADA compliance and where we stood, especially in regard to TxDOT and the sidewalk projects that were ongoing. And Jose got to tour the city with Robert Wood, one of our panelists, and he pointed out different things that he thought could result in improvements with the city. So we said, hey, what if we combine these two programs? We get people in to talk about them, make it be part of our Smithville Comprehensive Plan, and we get to hear from the voices of community members. So we're glad that you're here to contribute to this. And we're also very excited about our esteemed panelists that we put together. Jose gets a lot of the credit for making the contacts, and I think he had a couple of leads here in town that helped him reach out and find more. So I will start with Taylor Hodges because she's farthest down, a licensed master social worker. She has experience advancing accessible care for individuals with disabilities and seniors. She's currently serving at Towers Nursing Senior Center and Ascension Seton Hospitals. Welcome, Taylor. And I believe she's also involved with Bastrop County Cares and working with that. So a very good community connection. Dennis Burrell, Smithville resident and a former director of the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, brings 24 years of leadership in accessibility, advocacy, and statewide policy reform. Robin Roberts, former Accessibility Professionals Association president and a Texas registered accessibility specialist, brings deep expertise in accessibility and APA-CBE certification. And Robert Wood, a software developer at General Motors and an advocate for persons with disabilities. Robert brings lived experience and has been a valued collaborator with the City of Smithville on our accessibility efforts. So please welcome, with a round of applause, our wonderful panel. Next on the agenda, I am going to have them turn on their mics and just ask, kind of frame the conversation. what do you bring to the panel? What brings you to the panel? And a few of the questions that Jose sent you to be thinking about, and that'll help us set up to have the conversation with the community members. Yes, please use the microphone. Speak into them, turn them on green before you're ready to speak.
I guess I can start. So, as was mentioned, I work at Towers Nursing Home. I am their social services director. I've worked at Bastrop Lost Pines as well for the last 2.5 years, and prior to that, I worked in the hospital. Some of the things that I have experienced through working in a nursing home is accessibility for when we send our seniors home, or not even our seniors most of the time. Sometimes when we send anybody that comes to the nursing home, whether they're early in age, older in age, accessibility in the aging in place is really, really important in a community. I'm also on the board of directors for Bastrop County Cares, and this is something we've talked about with transportation. And that's where most of my kind of background and history comes from, is what does it look like to age in place? I was talking to some of the other folks up here, and we are seeing in the last couple of years more and more people going into nursing homes because they can't stay in their homes anymore. There's just not enough community accessibility for services here, whether it be doctor's office visits, transportation, food, water, getting into your favorite restaurants here, your libraries, different things like that.
Okay, we're going to go down live. So I'm Dennis Borrell. It was my pleasure to represent people with disabilities in the Capitol for a really long time. And if I could boil it down, I can boil it down to and all the issues at work down to one word, and that word is access. And it's access to not just the built environment. And I would encourage us not to look at just the built environment and say that's what accessibility is. Access can mean everything from employment to education, to the built environment, to transportation, to voting rights, to more. And as we think about people with disabilities, it's not a monolith. There are all kinds of different sections of it. Some people enter the world with disabilities. Others acquire their disability through accident or injury, and a whole bunch acquire disability through advancing age. And what we're looking at is, in America, about 20% of adults have some type of disability. And as you get up into your mid-70s, it's 50% and more. So this is a very significant part of our community. But who are they? But these are our parents, our grandparents, our brothers, our sisters, our colleagues, our coworkers, our neighbors, our veterans. Think of them in those terms, not as people with disabilities, but as those that we want to serve and have inclusive in our society. With that, I'll kick it to you, Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin. I started working for the state in 1997 for their architectural barriers program, doing plan reviews for accessibility. And that's where I sort of started learning this. I worked for about 3 years and then went out on my own and did that for about 14 years, and then worked for a company out of Houston. So I've been all over the state, and I've looked at a lot of buildings. I do the state required plan reviews and inspections for accessibility. Probably the relevant observation is the smaller the town, the more things seem to fall under the radar. There are in some of the bigger municipalities where they have a building permitting process, and I don't know if Smithville has that or not. But you have to go ahead and register with the state, so you're kind of stuck doing that process. And so that kind of automatically means someone's going to come out and look at that building when it's all done and make sure the work is compliant. Sometimes things in smaller areas can fall under the radar because they don't have a permitting process, or they're just not aware of that requirement. And then on the city, there's there's 5 titles of the ADA. Title II and Title III deal with buildings. Title II deals with uh, public facilities. So your programs and services that you provide are to be accessible. And just because you have an older building that isn't accessible doesn't mean that you don't have to make some accommodation for that program. And I'm gathering that you are sort of in that process of self-evaluation, which is great. I don't personally have a lot of experience in that side of things, but that's kind of, it looks like that's where you're headed, which is really good. And I'll turn it over to Rob.
Excuse me, I'm Robert Wood. I was paralyzed 12 years ago and trying to get out and do life. My youngest kid was 2 months old, so I had to find ways to do things, take him to doctors and go to doctors myself, and started realizing just how inaccessible places were. And if I dealt with it, tons of other people had to deal with it too. And that was back when I lived in Washington. I started, advocating with the groups I was in and with businesses and stuff like that. And then I moved here and started seeing it even more predominantly because I couldn't just go down the street to somewhere else. If there's no parking down here, I had to go to Bastrop or LaGrange, and I just decided, let me talk to the city and start getting more involved with it and see what changes could be done. Because if I deal with it, other people do. And I've seen other wheelchairs, but I don't see them in town, and I know that there's other people that use it. So why not try to make do for other people and just help out? So that's how I got into it.
Thank you all very much. One of the things that we did want to talk about as part of framing the conversation, why accessibility is so important, and especially why in Smithville. And Dennis, you brought up the point that the aging population. Aging is not a disability, but anything that we can do to help accessibility is going to help all of us as we age and as we try and navigate the different places and spaces that are part of our community. There are also invisible disabilities. And when you're talking about, Robin, you're talking about self-evaluation and what we're trying to do with the city, and there will be a brief update about that. But how can we ensure that we are aware and inclusive of the less visible disabilities?
Well, I'll take a first stab at it. But first of all, Judy, I'm going to disagree with you. Aging may not be a disability, but if it impacts, if some functional need emerges that you didn't have before in your activities of daily living, you got a disability. And look, there's a lot of people, older folks, and there's a lot of, I'm one of them. I'm one of you here who don't want to admit, they don't want to say they have a disability when in fact they do. Okay, so let's talk it. Invisible disabilities. Now, this is a huge issue. It's easy to see someone in a wheelchair. It's easy to see someone in an amputation. Can you recognize someone who has epilepsy and seizures? Well, no, but you should have your website checked so there's no flashing lights on there that'll cause somebody who's epileptic to go into a seizure. So there are things that can be done. There are major invisible disabilities surrounding mental health. Okay, and that can be done by being conscious of how you design your meetings, your organization type thing, so you're aware that when people need breaks, they can get them and they can feel comfortable going there. There's an emerging recognition of autism. Autism's been around for as long as human beings have existed. Yeah, but that can make communication very difficult. And that can make people who are caring for, say, a child with autism be reluctant to come to meetings. So you can have maybe a little safe, quiet room for them to be off and take a break when they need it too. The thing I would impress most about everybody here, people with disabilities never ask for the moon. And even the ADA does not require undue burdens. In other words, nobody's going to make you put a $200,000 elevator in an old building, but they'll make you come up, think of other ways that you can serve people and that you can do.
My experience with the regulations deals with the built environment, so there really aren't anything's in there that address neurodiversity conditions or things like that. There are some items that handle people with hearing impairments. And there are several requirements for people with visual impairments. And a real easy thing to do if you're having a meeting like this is maybe ask, does anyone need a sign language interpreter? Or can they read, a text, speech to text thing? So there are some steps that you can take like that don't really cost a whole lot. They're not renovating your whole building, but like I said, most of my experience is with the built environment. So, putting in a curb ramp in a strategic location can be really helpful, even though it can be costly too.
I can speak from why accessibility is important for Smithville, and not just Smithville, but our other smaller surrounding cities. So it's kind of like a threefold answer. So yes, we do have aging communities here as well, people that have lived there their whole life, and they're getting older. But we also have people that are, coming to Smithville to get away from Austin. Obviously, Bastrop, we see Teslas here, and it's kind of up and coming. So we are going to see an influx of people that are coming here. And a part of that, I know when my husband and I moved out here, back when COVID started, we looked at the schools. I have a child with ADHD, which is an invisible disability. Not everybody, looks at it like that. And I needed to make sure that the school, what their scoring was, how good their teachers were, if they had 504 and IEEP programs, because that was important to us. So a lot of people that are going to come out here in the next couple of years, which there may be a big kind of population boom, I would expect there to be, they're going to look at different things in the cities of what accessibility is, whether it's a physical disability that we can see, whether it's mental, psychological. And I think that that's really important to talk about now before we have that growth. And we are starting to see, more and more people coming out here and then not having those things, and it being a bigger problem eventually.
Do you have anything to add to this? Okay. That's good because we need that as well. The next thing that I was hoping to talk about, and I may call on Jose Rivera and or our city manager, Robert Tamble, but we have been going through the self-evaluation for the city of Smithville, and in particular for the structural environment. As part of the Texas Department of Transportation and our new sidewalks that have been installed all along Main Street, it's up to us to make sure that we have all the things in the right place to be ADA compliant. It includes putting notices on our memos that go out that make sure that we're able to offer telecommunications for the deaf and or an interpreter and closed caption for our videos, things like that. So we have to tell the state, yes, we are working to comply with these things. So that's one of the things that we're working on. That's one of the reasons that we're here now, is because we don't want this kind of self-evaluation, this kind of determination of what the city wants to do to be just from the city heads. We want it to be from the people with lived experience, the people that are in the community, and they have a different perspective than a lot of us are able to see. Robert, do you want the honors? Okay.
Okay, thank you all for coming tonight and being here and giving your input, especially the panel and the citizens. It's nice to see this many people out for this topic. We had a workshop last night that was extremely important. There were about 8 people there. So getting the word out is tough. That's a challenge that we have. Regarding accessibility, this has been something we've been working on for my almost complete tenure. When I first came here, there was one handicap parking space over here on the side, but you had to navigate a pebbled walkway. There was no door here, so you had to come all the way around to the front. And we do have the push buttons, but there were no parking spaces. So that was the first really major project we did in 2017-18, is to provide 2 spaces in front so that people can get in and out. You still can't use these doors, but because those are closed to the public. But we are making efforts to increase accessibility. I'll just take you through some history. About $2.7 million worth of sidewalks and ADA compliant ramps have been installed in the past 6 years, all the way down Loop 230 on the left side. If you're going toward the Grange, there was nothing there. We got that put in. We're trying to get grants to do the right side. We've kind of gone halfway about to Mills, but there's still work to be done. This facility was upgraded with ADA compliant restrooms. We also, Main Street, all the work that's being done on Main Street with the ADA compliant ramps that go from First Street all the way to 7th. So this is something we take seriously and want to improve going forward, but you're always limited by funding, not desire, but funding. How are you going to pay for it? Something you may not have thought about, that our Parks and Rec department really went above and beyond. They actually installed a playscape out at Riverbend that was more ADA compliant. I don't know the right term, but it's not coming to me right now. But we are dedicated and committed to continuing this effort as funding allows. Okay, did that kind of catch you up? Okay, got 4 new spaces downtown, and it's very colorful. There's a 5th and 6th going in on across from Quinto Patio. So again, we're trying to make it more accessible, because nothing more frustrating than once you get these ramps and sidewalks that are ADA compliant, merchants put stuff in the middle of it. So there's a compliance piece of this that we're going to start following once the construction is complete, to make sure those paths stay open. Okay? Questions? I haven't talked a thing about that.
That's all right.
I just wanted to let you know this would be available for viewing afterwards. If you want to come up and look when we're doing the tables, that's okay too. But it was our City of Smithville report and the readily achievable accessibility modifications that we could address. And that was done 2013 by BEFCO, and it's an evolving living document as we review the changes, the modifications every year, and then maybe fill out the report every 3 to 5 years as we try and make sure that we are maintaining our compliance status.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, now I want to hear from some of all of you. There should be a microphone at every table where there are people sitting. You might have to share a microphone. If you're ready to speak, we ask that you push the button and make sure the green light comes on. But what does accessibility mean to you in your everyday life in Smithville? What have you experienced? What have your loved ones experienced? What changes would you like to see made? So throw them out there. I'm ready to hear from anybody.
Well, you know I love a microphone, so. I don't know whether the new sidewalks address this fully, but when people aren't in wheelchairs but are not able to walk such long distances, it's a long way if you're in the middle of the block to get down to, so if you park in front of the store, you got to walk all the way to the end of the block to go up the ramp. And I wonder if that has been considered at all. I'll share my mic.
So with that aspect, if you notice, all of our, over time, you keep building roads up. I mean, these are basically the same roads that were here, sidewalks that were here in 1945. So the steps that we have now that we've redone, we're actually going to put rails to help you get up those. And they're going to be spaced out. It's not going to be every space, but there's at least two down a long block that you'll be able to use to get onto the sidewalk. Now, they're not ADA, it's not a ramp, but yeah, that you can step onto. That should be done in the next month. And there's a lot of drop-offs. We're actually adding railing to help so people don't fall off in some of those large drops, and that everything is painted yellow. So good things to come.
I'll jump in, I guess. I'm no expert, but I've been impressed with what I've seen going on around town to improve accessibility. And I can only imagine that budget is a very strong constraint on what can happen. But when I think about this, what I would like to see is, as much as possible, a movement in the direction of universal accessibility. So not special accommodations, but wherever possible, just not having barriers there in the first place. And an example that comes to mind sitting here in this room is that when this building was built back in the day, they clearly didn't anticipate leaders who were in wheelchairs, because there's a step going up to the dais, which doesn't really need to be there and probably wouldn't be super expensive to get rid of. But I think there's these things that create expectations, particularly in kids. I would want children who come in to see their local government at work to not see barriers that might prohibit some of them from easily being in a position of leadership.
I'm going to tag on that just a little bit, but one of the important things any community can do is have its citizens with disabilities be visible. And because that tells a message, there's already a lot of stereotypes around people with disabilities. And people actually will shy away from even communicating or getting to know people. And the thing is, these are people. Their disability is not who they are. And anything you can do to improve their visibility in the community demystifies that and makes things a whole lot easier.
I want to kind of piggyback off what you just said, because I've been here 3 years and going to places, a lot of the businesses are helpful for me when need be, but especially during all this road construction, front room, sweet tea, the average person in a wheelchair couldn't go to them because they didn't make temporary ramps or do anything like that to be accessible. Business owners and people of the town were asking me, how did you get here? People ask me, where do you park? I'm like, oh, block and a half down the street, or how did you get up the ramp? What ramp? I went up the curb, So people are starting to see, at least, from my perspective, seeing me out doing stuff, and they're starting to understand that, not I shouldn't say understand, but they're seeing more need for it versus just, oh, occasionally a wheelchair will come in here. So what you're saying about visibility is definitely important.
I'll say something about that too, because I talked to Jose about this previously, especially in Bastrop. We see a lot of our veterans go to the Legion, but they don't venture out to any really where else because it's not as accessible. So it doesn't have a ramp, or it doesn't have low stools, or maybe they're not in a wheelchair, but they have a cane, or they have something else that's going on. And we want people to be able to come into their community and spend time in their community, spend money in their community, which will end up coming back into the community. But if people don't feel like they're connected to their community or that they want them there, then they're not going to venture out of their space or their place where they feel most comfortable at.
I'll add that businesses have have an obligation. They don't have an obligation to do the self-evaluation that a public entity does, but they do have an obligation to do ongoing barrier removal. So even though you have a business that's, they haven't really done anything to their building to trigger the state requirement for review and inspection, if they don't have any accessible parking spaces and you're parking down the block, you know, you can file a complaint. I'm not the police, but there is a process for that, for business owners to also bring their facilities into compliance.
You know what I heard each one of us say is that there's a business case for serving the community of people with disabilities. Businesses should want to make a profit off the disability community, and I think most of the disability community want them to make a profit off that service.
Well, I'm part of like a social wheelchair group out of Austin mostly. And I'm the furthest one east, and there's, 20, 30 of us in there. And we're constantly talking about, doing stuff. Every month we go somewhere and do something. And several times members are like, hey, let's go to Robstown. There's nobody nowhere in town that can accommodate 10 wheelchairs, and it's just, granted, smaller buildings, older buildings, that's one thing, but the closest place that could accommodate, to my knowledge, would be like Smithville Brewery, but their ramp to get in, most of the people in the chairs couldn't get up it. So just trying to do more and, show, I went through and looked at my credit card, how much I've spent in downtown Smithville since I moved here. And I didn't realize how much I spent. And that's just, if I'm one person doing that, how many wheelchair people in wheelchairs or canes or whatever that can't come visit these businesses aren't spending that? How much money is being lost, and I think that, I'm constantly hearing about we're a tourist town and we need, to make things better, but how are you going to have tourism if you're not even accessible? So just one of those things that I've noticed as a big issue for me.
And not just the economy. If I think about some of the programs and services that the rec center offers, the library offers, things that make Smithville a more livable community, if we're missing part of the population, then we're not getting the whole picture. And I think that's an important thing to consider. Our Libraries for Health program, it's funded by the St. David's Foundation through a grant to the library. And one of the key components of that is to have community conversations, to have multi-generational conversations. And we're doing it as the people are using art to express themselves or working in the gardens to express themselves. And they're able to make a connection with someone across the table. If half of our population or a significant percentage of our population can't get to the table, they're going to be missing those connections. So I think it's very important for us to think about what Robin mentioned is we've got to find a way to have the programs in different places or fix the buildings so that everybody has equal access. So those are some of the things that bring us to the table from a city perspective, from a library perspective. And now you guys are going to get a chance to discuss amongst yourselves. And I will invite our panelists to make their way to the tables and, ask them questions, share some of your thoughts with them that you brought to the discussion tonight. And we want to hear what your ideas are. What can we as a community do to improve the accessibility of our neighbors? And if you want to keep speaking, yeah, we can keep speaking in public, but then when we also break out in the tables, all the tables have some sticky notes, and if you talk amongst yourselves and think about ideas that you want to do, then we will put some of those ideas on the pads and we'll get the participants to put their little sticky dots on the ones that they like the best. So,
Um, I think that addressing infrastructure is definitely important. If we're talking about supporting our community, however, I would like to ask how we plan to platform and support individually disabled members of the community. Because as much as these big sweeping changes are helpful, they don't always, they can make things accessible, but they don't make things useful or worth getting out of the house for. And often disabled people struggle to make a lot of money. And so the business concerns are great, but how are people in our community who are dealing with these issues getting that money to begin with? Like how, what events are platforming them specifically?
Actually, with that, I wish Janice was here with the workforce because it's something that keeps coming up around discussions in the county and in the state. Um, how can we bring this community, especially to towns like ours, how we can improve workforce and provide a decent living wage for a community that right now either they can't work, and we talked about this when Robert shared his story when he got an interview at a job, perfect match, good pay, and when he got to the place, he couldn't get to the second floor. There was no elevator or access to it. That happens often. There's a lot of job opportunities that they physically you cannot get to the building or stuff like that, and it's something that it gets discussed often, but I don't feel that from the policy side, and that's one of the things that hopefully moving forward from this conversation with the lawmakers and our community, we're able to move forward in a way that we can incentivize not only what we do, like programming or what we do infrastructure, but things like it matters to our community and bringing to this community people that are able to participate and actually thrive in our community. So that's definitely something that we're discussing, and hopefully from this we can move to more specific things like what you're discussing too.
thank you. And Bernadette just asked if everybody signed in. So if you haven't, we do have the sign up sheet going around. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves and we'll try and, what kind of ideas? What do you think we can do? Can you help answer Clover's question about what we can do for individuals? Can you help answer some of the topics that were brought up by our panel? How can we improve the business environment? How can we improve our programs and services? So put your thinking caps on.
Richard, I'm John. Grover. I've seen you at the brewery. Haven't had an opportunity to connect, so glad. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I missed the first.
Yeah. Can definitely appreciate that.
I think the thing that I find most helpful to me is at the ramps, that's usually the corners, is to have the pipe to just hold on to for a little balance. Balance is something I'm sorely lacking.
Yeah. I'll share I'll share a funny story about the schoolhouse. So, I had a loved one that was completely disabled for 21 years that we cared for at home. And, so I'm very, they are good, yes. So, so.
Yeah, did you say it was in your family? It's just they don't.
It was my mother's. She had suffered an accident, was, tetraplegic, so quadriplegic and unable to speak, but mentally all there. And, but so when so I have the schoolhouse here on Gresham, old schoolhouse. And, and there's a wheelchair ramp that is available on the south side of the building, and it has railing. And, so one of the first things I did when I bought it was I went out and checked the grade of the slope and everything, because I was kind of curious when it was built, who built it, and to what standards. And it was actually built, so it was a working school until 1973. And then from 73 to 83, it was a vocational school. So they did workshop and metal shop and stuff like that over there. Well, the vocational school for Smithville is the senior class is the one that built the wheelchair ramp. And it turns out, and this is the craziest part, that was well before ADA. Yes, and they built it to the state of California standards, which are higher than the federal standards. So it's an inch per, I think the federal standard is an inch per foot. Yeah, and in California, it's 1 to 18 instead of 1 to 12. And so these guys actually built it. And I mean, they didn't know, but I'm just saying that they built something in the early 80s that exceeded the California ADA standards. And anyway, I just found that really, I found it
just a couple more minutes of discussion and then we'll reconvene. Okay, I hate to break up such lively conversations. I appreciate the engagement that we're seeing. But now I'm hoping that each of you has maybe a spokesperson for your tables so that we can share out what you are discussing, what's important. But I also need your help because I have 4 boards up here. And we are interested in priority areas. What do we need to work on? What do we need to focus on that is coming from the community instead of coming from the state, telling us you have to dot your I's this way and cross your T's this way? What's important to us as community members? Some ideas to facilitate some of the improvements. What can we come up with as community members, as people who are part of this, walking these streets, using these buildings, participating in programs? How can we facilitate improvement? What does my 3rd board need to say? Microphone, please.
Well, just the first thing I noticed, Judy, based on our discussion here is the progress tracker that Alexis shared from the previous meeting, correct? They're mostly hardscapes, infrastructure improvements, and we talked about, I guess you would call them soft programs like senior pairing, even at the rec center, Alexis shared some great ideas, like the Meals on Wheels folks. Some of them may want to do like a senior pairing, like with some of the kids that come through there and working with them. Volunteers for, like we talk about at the chamber, the events we do. And I was mentioning that at our Wing Fest in October, Towers Nursing Home usually has 2 cooking teams. because they want a big space because they bring a busload or two of some of the folks from Towers and they enjoy being out there during the day. But there's no reason they can't do things like face painting for kids. That was Alexis's idea, or some of the other, we're always looking for volunteers, and I don't think we work hard enough to include seniors. And so I think that that's another, maybe that could be a fourth board, or at least it's worth another separate discussion.
Or an idea to facilitate improvements, include seniors as volunteers, if that's, and should our priority areas be split in structural versus programmatic elements? Same page. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so you segued into what I was about to talk about, is that, and it's also what Kathy was talking about, is that, historically, a lot of societies marginalize those with disabilities, whether it's mental or physical. And we've made tremendous, in most societies have made tremendous improvement in that area. But Jose was even pointing out different programs, and I don't remember where you were saying, where there were actual community planning efforts to integrate people of all ages into one place. I'm not saying that's the direction we need to go. I'm just saying that, like, kind of going off of what Kathy was talking about, people that are isolated live unhealthier and shorter lives, and people that are integrated live longer, healthier lives. And the structural improvements in the community and social improvements play off of each other, right? If we make structural improvements, it gets people physically able to get places. But if we make social improvements, if we know someone that's disabled, we go, hey, come down to front room with me tonight, whatever. We get people involved, or we do things at the rec center, we get them involved in the community, then I strongly advocate doing like what Jose and maybe some of the others have done. Go around town with someone like Rob. We don't realize the small things that create barriers for members of our community until you go and walk it yourself. And we were talking about here at the table, I haven't done it myself, but I have some colleagues that have done the tour that the folks at the Texas School for the Blind will take you on, where it's in Austin, if you're familiar with it. And they take you, they put the blindfolds on you, and you cross North Lamar to get to Central Market, and it's terrifying. I have a colleague who, he's a big, brave guy, and he said he stood at that corner for 5 minutes, scared to step out, when the crosswalk was free. So anyway, just connecting with the folks, talking to the folks, hearing from the folks, making them part of the community. So I think the structural and the social, really play off of each other.
And following up with that, I think when I've been here almost 2 years, and when we started having the conversation coming up again for the ADA, and we went around, and actually I did kind of went around the facilities and everything by myself. I did come up with some notes and whatnot and reported to Robert. But then, like, from heaven, Robert Wood came out of nowhere, and it's like, I have some concerns. I'm like, I'm here to hear you. So I asked him, can we go around and just have a tour? And he gladly accepted. And I'm glad he did that, because honestly, ever since I go around any place I go, I look at these minor things that if you don't know, you don't know. Things like inclinations, handrails, you name it. Like, there's so many small details that if you've never gone through the challenge, they will just go over your head. And based on the conversation that we have here, I think, and my personal experience doing this for the city, I think it might be worth considering somewhat of a community training or exposure to challenges, like something like that, walking blindfolded, or something that already talk with staff, get a few wheelchairs and actually go down Main Street and see how hard it is, and experience life from somebody else's eyes. And it is very revealing. And I think we might benefit from that community basis, especially now that we're moving into a policy state from the comprehensive plan standpoint. we have an opportunity to move forward as a city, as a community, to establish things that would not only impact now, but future generations coming.
I think one of the things, oh, sorry.
Rob? There's something kind of following off all of what you all just said. One is the job I had previously was a mechanic bus system where I lived. Every new employee had to ride the bus system on a wheelchair to experience it. And like I talked to Jose about, hey, city employees, I got wheelchairs alone, let's go do this. But the other thing is, I think it's Kathy was saying, like getting the more community involvement with the events. I avoid almost every event that's here in downtown. I went to the Wing Fest last October. That was not accessible. Where the Chamber of Commerce was to pay, it wasn't accessible. One of the wing stands wasn't. And at Christmas time, I avoid that stuff too, because the parking, Wing Fest, they had the handicap parking at Chamber of Commerce blocked off. Bring in somebody that is in the community, that isn't just government or, on the planning, and get the other side of it. It might help with the planning to be a little more effective to get more people out. So just my thoughts on that.
I think one of the things that we talked about a little bit too, and what I've talked to Jose and some others about, is education. So we try to disseminate as much information as we can, as quickly as we can for events and different things. But a lot of people don't know what benefits are out there. I didn't know that Smithfield Library had, a fund or anything like that. And I always try to send people home from the nursing home or from the hospital with as much resources as they can. But here locally, I think, somebody made a good point here, is that if it's not something searchable on the web, that you're not going to find it. So, we always hear about events or marketing events to meet with vendors and all these kinds of people, but we don't have anything local where we're meeting with our Chamber of Commerce, with the bank, with the school district, with home health agencies, with nursing homes, with local businesses, and we're all talking as a community of what we all have to offer, and what's available or what we could do better. And I think education in a community is really, really important.
Okay.
The one that is most important to me for getting around in downtown Smithville is the handrails on the new ramps. Balance for people my age is very important, more so than strength. But if you just got something to stick out to put your hand on as you go down or up a ramp, that's very helpful. My wife was diagnosed many years ago with multiple sclerosis, and she's doesn't come downtown very much, and that's one of the reasons is that it's not easy, but it's not necessarily somebody else's fault. She understands that. But and I'm going to have to leave here in a few minutes, but before this is over. But I just wanted to throw that out about I think that it's relatively inexpensive to go in and put up some handrails even after you've poured the concrete.
I wanted to add that all of these programs are great. When implementing them, especially in places where there is funding, where we are paying people to do things, I think that as much as possible, we need to find disabled people to do the work. Because if not, partially because self-advocacy is more effective and done by people who know what they're doing instead of following a guidebook, but also because it is really hard to make money, if you have disabilities, and having the city implement these things through people who need the help and to teach people things that they don't already know or put things in place that they don't already have. Yeah, we just can't forget on an individual level.
This actually something we discussed last meeting that we had. That education piece doesn't always just should go to the community, but also to us, to the government. There's a lot of federal credits and other opportunities that cities and companies could utilize for bringing in workforce and training people with disabilities. But often, because they don't know, it doesn't happen. So it's a lost opportunity for revenue for that company. Also, they're bringing opportunities, and those are things that towns like us that we're looking for bringing in qualified workforce. We should be looking more often than not to observe these opportunities, because like often the first thing that you always hear, especially back there, is revenue. Is always, where's the revenue? Well, there's revenue. We just have to look where it is, because it doesn't revenue always look the same way. And these are opportunities that we might be missing.
I have 2 or 3 things I want to say. One is the curve. The curve was very high, and especially in front of the older buildings. And there's a curb out here. And I rode my golf cart over here and I could park it just fine, but I couldn't get up the curb without holding on to something, and I had parked the golf cart too far away to hang on to that. So I had hope that the truck I put my hand on didn't have a car alarm, because if it did, it was going to be startling for everybody. And I moved here to Smithville from Bastrop, and I heard about the Wing Fest. And since I'm from Bastrop and we have a lot of bird watchers there, I thought, oh, this is great. We're going to count birds. I didn't know we were going to eat the birds. So that was quite a surprise for me. And it gave me a little bit of a feeling about what the atmosphere is going to be like here. So, but I've really enjoyed it. It's really been a lot of fun. But since I got really old, older than I thought I'd ever be, I have slowed way down. My speed was slow and slower, but now it's slow and stop. So when you ask people to volunteer who are older, you have to give them plenty of time to get where they're going to go. And that was the second thing I wanted to say. And the third thing I want to say is, how do we get Dollar General and the other dollar store that I don't go to because it's not as much fun, to get their doors to where you can actually get in the building? I say every time I go in there, I say, you really have to want to come here because it's so hard to get in. Usually some nice person will open the door for me, but there's not always a nice person around. That's the 3 things I just wanted to say.
Any other, either from the center table or from Joan's table in the back that you discussed and you want to add to the charts?
I can add a little bit. It's sort of playing off of what she just said is enforcement. So I think, Rob, you told me the story a year or 2 ago about, even if the infrastructure's in place, if someone's parked in the way, you can't get there, right? If someone parks over the crosswalk between the 2 ramps, you can't get there, right? And so, and the enforcement, it's not all on one entity, but it's even, you could even call the doors that don't work a bit of an enforcement activity, right? It's, in that case, it should be the responsibility of the merchant. But real quick, we talked at our table about invisible barriers. We talked about it a little bit earlier. And so I've actually got 3 kids, and I've got 3 kids of mine that have disabilities in one way or the other, invisible disabilities. I've actually got one with autism, one with mental health issues, and one with autism. And a lot of people here know several of them. 2 of them graduated from here. One of them works at the wine bar. And John, he's the one with Caesars. What did I just say? I said the word a minute ago. Okay, see that I'm getting old too, right? So what was it, 5 seconds in between? And the word already fell out of my head. But and so we've had, it's been very eye-opening for us. We've had three completely different sets of challenges. But like with the middle one, we had an episode a few years ago where he was in a situation where he could not walk from our house across the street to our barn because of what was going on with him. And I was like, come on, man, just get out of the, never mind, I won't say it the way I said it to him at the time. But it was like, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I don't want to. Thank you so much for coming tonight. But anyway, I just want to highlight that. I don't want to talk about our situation anymore, but since no one talked about invisible barriers, I just wanted to give at least one example and how that can impact people.
Just to tack onto that real quick.
Yeah.
Our seniors are here and advocating for themselves. That is not true with every other population here, especially children. And of every age, like really little teenagers, especially people in our school systems, because they are frequently both socially and legally unable to advocate for themselves.
I'm glad you brought that up. A couple of things came up in our conversation. First of all, by the way, there is a citizen-driven way to enforce accessible parking laws. It's called Parking Mobility. It's on your phone. It's an app. You don't have to confront anybody. You just send in photographs. And on top of that, the people get a break on the fine if they go through an online training. So it forces them to change their behaviors going into the future. Free parking mobility. Public, yeah. Kids, what I would recommend is that the city's in a position where they can have an internship program for students with disabilities, whether they're hopefully paid a little bit, but maybe they don't have to be paid. But we should be able to do that. We should be able to have every city department take in a student with a disability as an intern and develop some of those work skills that you were talking about. The biggest thing I saw in all the small towns in Texas was the population is aging. They're going to need more caregivers, yet the younger people that would fill those jobs are leaving the towns. So you're having a situation with an increase in demand, a decreasing workforce, and unfortunately people, and I know you touched on this, may have to go into an institution because they have no choice. So that's something, it's a long-term thing, but can be addressed. Finally, the last thing, and I think this would go with you, Rob. Interior design and accessibility is a big deal in all kinds of public buildings and businesses. By that, I mean you go in and there's all like clunky furniture blocking people's ability to move around. Or as you mentioned, Brian, there's things sticking out from the side and people with visual impairments bonk into them. So, and that ought to be something that would be minimal cost, if no cost, and could be instituted very rapidly.
So one of the reasons I decided to help out with the city with the ADA compliance stuff is I have a 6-year-old who is visually impaired. He's colorblind. And when we were picking out the playscape for Riverbend, I made it a point to say no primary colors. Red, greens, blues, and yellows can actually cause fatigue, and it can cause, different brainwave stuff happen in kids with autism and who are colorblind. It's one of those, advocating for children, like Clover was saying. We're now looking at more playground stuff for the parks up here. And we're like, okay, once again, inclusion, nothing that can make loud noises, things that kids their wheelchairs can get through, no bright colors, and just very calm. So it's on the radar, and you don't realize it's a problem until you deal with it. And it's a big deal to these kids, and getting these kids out there and accepting other kids for that's another big deal. Yeah, so I know with our son, it gives him a lot of tension. He'll start screaming. He's like, I can't look at that. It hurts. So he has special glasses with different prisms in them that help him with that. But I mean, not everyone can afford that, so we try to make it more fun for these kids to be able to go to things.
The nice thing about adaptive equipment is it's actually accessible to everybody.
So I wanted to mention about your parking mobility app. It doesn't work everywhere. We need to, if we want that to work, we need to get the city on board with it. I personally am not a fan of that app. The owner thinks it's the cure-all. It'll help with ticketing, get people to learn, but there's more to it. But getting ticketing, I've run across it all the time at Brookshire. Tractors parking in the stripes, cars parking in the stripes, and it's getting old. That's a big issue. So if we can get the city on board though, that'll help. In the meantime, anybody that does contribute to that, it goes into their database and they use that as information to help force cities to get on board with it and carry on from there. So I just thought I'd chime in on that because I've talked with a lot of people about that.
Piggybacking from what you said, and I know we talked about this from the policy standpoint. Like, again, this is one of the things that we're evaluating moving forward. And out of this conversation, it's one of the things that I've been drafting portions of it to try to present to council and see if we can actually put this in the comprehensive plan and actually make it enforceable. Because that's the hardest part. You can have a bunch of laws, but if nobody does anything with it, how good are they? And that's one of the things that I'm trying to draft something where the police department and the city can actually enforce those things. And one of the things that we talked about is like in some cities, what they do, let's say the fine is $200, they double that amount. So that extra money goes for improvements for compliance. So it makes sense. It hurts the person that already are parking in a place that it shouldn't in the first place. It helps them remember that definitely helps with memory, not doing that again, but also helps the community that they're affecting in the first place to provide additional improvements. And I've been reading about other places that have done it. It seems like it works to some degree. But again, enforcement and having a buy-in from the community is always the hardest part. But I think we're in a place that we probably can make it happen in the next year or so if we can get this rolling.
There is actually a regulation in Texas to paint the words "no parking" in the access aisle. A lot of older spaces don't have that, but it is required.
The two ones that we have here, they did that, but there's some details that we're discussing that we might have to address with the new parkings, but.
One of the things that we kind of discussed at our table, or maybe it was just me talking to myself, which could in fact be true, but I work with a lot of people on construction and design aspects, whether it's an outdoor or indoor facility. And I couple that with my background in sales and marketing. And one of the things that I think we struggle with is in the world we live in today is we're competing with, we're talking about an issue that's very near and dear to all of us. That's why we're here. But we're trying to get everyone else's attention, right? And we only have 30 seconds to do it. And we're competing with social media and we're competing with, whatever Netflix, whatever the case may be, right? So how do you take an issue that's near and dear and important to you and be able to communicate it effectively to someone inside of 30 seconds to affect change, right? And one of the things that I've experienced in my life and I try to share with people is ADA requirements are really a minimum. And they should really be looked at that way. And here's why I say that. 1 in 6 Americans experience long-term disability within their lifetime, long-term disability being defined as a period of 18 months or longer in which you're not able to perform to normal standards or your normal living. That's 1 in 6. So what does that mean? That means someone who's experienced long-term disability, and more frightening and even more relevant is you're one of them. It's not if, it's when. You hear me? Can I get an amen, right? So if we're going to talk about these things, let's do it in the context of ADA is really a minimum. This is something coming to a town near you soon. You two are older. You two are going to experience this in terms of a long-term disability. It's not if, it's when. And so how can we effectively make change inside our design standards, whether it's flow, right? Yes, I own the old schoolhouse. Yes, it's a commercial building. No, it's not open and available. But instead of 32-inch doors, I've taken the entire door and door jamb out so that the access in and out of the rooms is 46 to 48 inches. And that's very deliberate, right? Because I don't want someone who's in a wheelchair to have any issue getting in and out of those rooms. But what you also notice is that if you study design flows and traffic patterns, is that when you make something more accessible, it's more enjoyed, even with able-bodied people, let's say, right? So there's kind of this sense and sensibility issue about it. And I just think it's important when we're trying to figure out how to communicate this, let's make sure that we're focused on a 30-second message. And I didn't take 30 seconds, I apologize. But a 30-second message about, ADA is really a bare minimum. Here's why. This is coming to a town near you soon. Let's do the right thing. It's only 10% more than it is to do anything else. So let's do it right. Let's do it well. And let's do it for you and your loved ones, right? And just move forward, right? And I just want to work on this and helping communicate it and sell it, because I think it's an easy sell. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm going to let Rob have his say. And I would also like, after Rob is done, I've got some of these up here. I know some of you have sticky notes. If you want to add them to these panels wherever they fit, because this is going to help guide us as we proceed. And one of the big parts of us wanting to do this is what John just said so well, is that ADA is just the bare minimum, and we want to do more. We want to be able to reach out and be more inclusive and be more connected to all of our community members. And that's where the phrase that kicked us off on this project is "nothing about us without us" is such a very important part of what's directing these conversations. Robert?
I had one quick thing on the enforcement. Like for parking, I know in Austin, they have a program where any one of us can go take the course and actually write tickets out for code, disability parking enforcement type thing. So maybe even that's something to help with for Smithville, since, the police force isn't so huge. That might be something to look into replicating here too. I know other cities do it, but I know Austin does too. I'm not fully aware because I'm not involved with it, but I've got a friend in Austin. She does it. She's written several tickets. In Washington, the program I knew about, it didn't matter where it was. Unfortunately that's a whole nother ballgame with their ticket, the way they did it. So, but Texas, I don't know the answer to that one.
And this will be like Jeopardy. I'll do the question after the answer. Just so that it's on the recording. But what I was asking is if whether a system like that applies to both public, for example, the new spaces on Main Street, or private, which would be like the spaces at Brookshire's.
Before you all leave, I do want you to come put 4 or 5 little sticky dots. There are some at every table. And also put your sticky notes, because those are going to be valuable to us. But tell us, out of some of these priority areas, out of some of these additional resources, what ones resonate with you? What ones are important for us to consider going forward? and in ways that we can make improvements and make our community be more connected and more inclusive. And then I would also ask before you all leave, we'll talk about our steps forward, and if our panelists have anything else to add before y'all say goodbye, I would appreciate a word from them as well.
I would like to say something, that's something that's been discussed in the people that have brought this forum, and we have somewhat like a conversation about it before. These plans are great. This bunch of papers that we did 12 years ago are amazing, but they stay in a drawer if nobody does anything with them. We got a consultant with a grant, and they did a fantastic job of pointing at deficiencies. But if we don't get together and actually follow up and keep accountable, ourselves, me, and government, nothing gets done. So one of the things that we not only been follow up with this and actually refreshing this, I've been working for the last 6 months very close to everything related to these reports. But I would like to ask this group if you will be open moving forward, creating a group that meets quarterly or every 6 months to follow up on the things we said that we're going to do, point out the deficiencies that we have, and find pathways to actually create action, not just a conversation, but things that we can put in place and move forward and improve. Because if we love this town as much as I think y'all do, this is not only the bare minimum like ADA, we like literally ADA is just the bottom line, like just bare minimum. But if we want to create a space, a town that actually is attractive to everybody, because we talked about economic development and all these things, revenue, let's focus on the things that we can actually do to bring our friends, our family, and the people that we love to the town that we love and make it more accessible and enjoyable. So if you're open with the emails that you share with us, I would like to provide updates about what we're doing. And at some point, get back to y'all and ask again of doing something similar like this, if you're open to, and basically keep us accountable and see where we at.
And join the conversation with us. I do know there is a sign-up sheet that's going around, and if you are interested in serving on a connection group, I'm not going to call it a committee, I'm not going to call it a task force, but just something where we can get together and have we stuck to our plans and things like that, then I want you to take one of those colored sticky dots and put it next to your name on the sign-up sheet so we'll know who to call and contact.
Yeah.
Do any of you have anything else to say?
It's really just a question. Does the city of Smithville have an ADA coordinator? Is that you, Jose?
I guess so. We have like 20 hats here, so that's the challenges that we face in a small town. And I guess that
I think
have made that hat for myself.
yeah, and I
I'm
think
very happy to that's the case, but no,
Yeah.
officially we don't.
right.
There is some training through the ADA centers. There's ADA centers all over the nation. The Southwest one is probably the closest. But there are trainings for ADA coordinators.
That would be amazing. Would you be able to share
I'll
some?
get you the information.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think on the record, our city secretary is listed as the ADA coordinator, but it is a team effort. There are 7, I think, on the team, the department heads that are trying to work together to address that. So, but we could all, the training that Jose and I were able to take as part of this grant, there's a lot that we can learn through those trainings. So I will encourage them. The grant for the American Library Association Libraries Transforming Communities is $10,000. Some of that money is to be able to make changes to our community and the most important thing is to have those community conversations and to reach the community. So can we use some of those funds to facilitate improvements? Maybe. One of the ideas, I don't know if it came up over there, but in terms of the businesses, our city, our chamber, we've done grants before for the local businesses. They're facade grants. What can they do to improve their building, to make it look better, to replace the windows, to paint the front, things like that? What if we did an accessibility grant, a mini grant where the business would chip in a matching amount to some of this grant money and they make amendments to their buildings so that they are more accessible? So things like that are what we can be thinking about.
To add to that, Judy, actually, I've drafted a proposal for that we're gonna, I'm working with Jill with economic development so we can do it officially to present it to council. So, because like council is the one that gonna approve y'all the ones that approve the facade grants and all that with working with the chamber. But that's actually in the works. I think the next month it should be done. Just so you know.
So I can see nobody put sticky notes on education, and that's okay. But I think that John touched base on it a little bit and some other people is that we need to get more people involved in what our plans are. And I think a part of that is the importance of education, because the people that care about accessibility are obviously people that struggle with it or people that have seen it happen from experience. But most people, I can say, they don't, because it doesn't affect them. So how do you get people excited or motivated to do something that doesn't affect them? And a part of that is education and incentives to the community. How is this going to benefit businesses where to them it doesn't matter if it's really accessible or not, because they're going to have able-bodied people come into their establishment, right? So I think a big priority for any community is dissemination of information, is getting people excited for any change, anything that is going to affect whether it's a small part of the community or not, because the big picture is that if we get more accessibility for things, we're going to bring more people to the community, which will affect other areas of that community, schools, policies, different things for the city, roads. It brings more funding. So, sorry, I'm just a big education person, so.
So I want to piggyback on that idea of bringing awareness to people and educating people. We do a lot of programs at the garden that are mixed ages, and you see the kids become aware of the needs of the seniors in the room, and they start to respond immediately. It just becomes second nature. So we separate people by age so much in society, and seeing the mixing has really been informative for everybody. And Jim's motto of each one, teach one.
Bernadette, actually, and Taylor might in the future, now that we met, I drafted a long time ago, working with Janice based on conversations, that one of the challenges is getting to combine communities that sometimes they're just disconnected, and especially with the huge need on childcare in the community and places like Switzerland. What they've done is they combine two populations with often look very similar. Childs with older seniors, they put them in the same place, and all of a sudden you have a community that feels that they have a purpose again. They help these kids learn stuff, and the kids also teach them a few things as well. And then you're sharing a space that all of a sudden it was to some degree, and I think you mentioned this before, it's kind of depressing sometimes. If you ever been to a senior home, oftentimes it feels sad. bringing in these kids, it just changes the whole atmosphere. But getting buy-in from a place like perhaps Towers, which is the closest one that we have, it's kind of challenging because everything comes like, how do we get people trained for that? What's the money and all of that? But also there's a lot of money in that space as well. We just have to find a way to adjust things, educate the facilities on how to make it happen. Because right now, the biggest challenge for the workforce, especially getting training people to learn a new trade, is childcare. They can, like, they're working and they need, in order for them to go to school, they need to leave their kids somewhere. And right now, there's a lot of people that could have been working something else, but they can't because they don't have nobody leave their kids with.
I'll add one more thing to that, just in case anybody doesn't know. So when somebody is in long-term care, they get Medicaid benefits. So they get like a very small portion of money once a month that's given to them. Maybe it's $100, $200. I will tell you, a lot of our residents want to spend their money. They want to go to the dollar store, they want to go to Walmart, but we do not have the capacity to transfer so many people so often, because we also have people that we have to take them into Austin for their heart doctor, for echoes, for all kinds of appointments. So it leaves very little time to get them to be able to go to the grocery store, to go to get their nails done at the nail salon. And so if we had more relationships with people in the community for transportation, that's my second education, transportation. If we had more of that, we would see, and I stress this because I think it's a big, people think, well, you're in your nursing home and that's it for you. That's where you go. And to be crude, is where you go to die, but it's not. You can still live in a nursing home and you can go to the community if your community is accessible, if you have other resources available that can get you out of there and into the community to still enjoy going out to lunch, going to dinner, going to the grocery store. We just need to find those things.
I want to thank all of you for being here, sharing your feelings, your thoughts, your perspectives, and I want to encourage you to continue. Like I said, you can come, just put a dot next to your name on the sign-in sheet. If you are interested in getting together with us as we proceed our next steps forward, as a city government, we will probably try and use some of the money to make improvements in a city building or city buildings, things like that. But we're also always looking for other funding sources that we can use to help make those changes. The most important thing that I want to build on here is the community connection, and to continue with those conversations and continue making that connection. So thank you all very much for being a part of this.
Like for me to just put a dot on everybody? Sure.